everybody. Welcome to the Future of Bitcoin panel. And if you think we're just going to tell you whether Bitcoin is going up or down, you're in the wrong room. We're actually going to be talking about more substantive things. And we have a really interesting group of people here, including a guy I've wanted to meet for a while, Adam Draper, the founder of Boost. And
that's nice of you to say.
Yeah, well, we've been sort of traveling around in the Bitcoin circles for a while, but we've actually never met before today. Boost, I heard, has this incredible goal of investing in 100 Bitcoin companies over the next 3 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I've actually been saying over the next 3 years for about 8 months now. So it's 2 years, 4 months. I have to hit the 100. But we're fully focused on Bitcoin now. We are going to be, we've done 26 Bitcoin companies in the past, and we will be doing another, obviously, 66. Is that right? No, it's more than that. 76. Oh man, I have so many more to do. So over the next 3 years, get to 100.
So how do you do that? I mean, what are you investing in right now? Or what?
So it's a wide spectrum of different types of companies. Most people, when they're thinking about Bitcoin, they're thinking about exchanges and actually buying into Bitcoin, such as BTC China and brokerages such as Coinbase. Payment processors, BitPay, Snapcard are other types of services. And then there's a new realm, so blockchain technologies, APIs for Bitcoin. There's a huge sector here, and what a lot of people aren't doing necessarily that they should be is when you're thinking about Bitcoin, you should be thinking globally, which is why we're probably at this conference right now. And so each of these companies that's actually emerging in the United States, in China, in Australia, and Japan, like you can have similar companies in every country. And so I actually think it will be very easy to hit my 100 number. We're already at 26. We're going to do another 25 to 30 in our next session. And so I believe it's going to be much more easy than it sounds.
It sounds. So those 26, are those all U.S. companies right now? Or
wide range. So we've actually backed companies in Philippines, Singapore, Finland, Mexico, Argentina. So no, not just U.S.
And what are you absolutely not investing in? What's the worst thing to invest in Bitcoin right now?
In Bitcoin specifically? Because, I mean, I could easily say, like, I'm not investing in drones because I'm
Bitcoin
doing
or
full
crypto?
Bitcoin. So I would say I'm not backing the hardware side of mining, and it's only because mining is like one of the most important parts of Bitcoin. It's just that it's sort of a margin business that like the margins narrow as Bitcoin becomes more and more popular, and you need way more money than we give in order to make a really great mining company. So I would say mining is something that we are not necessarily backing. We have backed a mining software company though, because hardware companies should build hardware, but it turns out they're not as good at building software.
Okay, so I want to move on to Bobby Lee. Bobby and I first started talking about a year ago when China was driving the price of the Bitcoin up over $1,000. There was a lot of excitement in China, and you know, things have changed since then. China's a very strange place to be doing a Bitcoin business. Just give us an update on what's going on in China.
Yeah, it almost comes to with the 1 year anniversary when PBOC, the central bank in China, put out some regulation. So that's when the fervor sort of peaked in China in terms of the crazy bubble demand. So that was December 5th of 2013. After that, Bitcoin, you know, some people mischaracterized thinking that Bitcoin was no longer legal. That's actually not the case. Bitcoin is still very, very much allowed and legal in China. It's just not a currency. So now Bitcoin is viewed as a digital asset, and people are free to trade it. In fact, the core people, the Bitcoin users in China, see it as a vehicle to make money. You know, in China, more so than anywhere else, people really want to make money. So they see it as a speculation.
So is everything settled then with the government there, or are there more, you know, is there a potential for the shoe to drop at some point?
Well, to tell you the truth, I think the Chinese government is very busy in other areas, so they're not really too much worried about Bitcoin. They're probably waiting for other countries to take the lead, looking to the US regulators to take the lead. Chinese regulators, in theory, have said they want to regulate Bitcoin. They want to make sure Bitcoin exchanges like ours follow proper KYC, AML procedures for anti-money laundering and so on. However, they've carved out a separate swimming lane for Bitcoin. So banks and financial institutions don't touch Bitcoin, and Bitcoin companies touch Bitcoin. So in the meantime, we're just doing our thing. The regulators are not bothering us too much.
So what's the biggest challenge for you to do business in China then right now?
Right now, part of it is working with the banking system. They're not allowed to touch it yet. We work with them for the funds and so on. So there's no clear rules about whether there's money transmission. So that's still being worked out, the regulation side. The other challenge is just growing the user base, making people more aware of Bitcoin. They see it as an investment asset to buying the Bitcoin for appreciation, but it's also very volatile. So when something's very volatile, the traders come in, they love it. They love it. It's more volatile than gold. So they're like, oh, crazy, let's go crazy, buy, sell, day trade, and make money. Yeah. So that's where they're thinking. Okay,
Adam White, moving on to you. Coinbase, I think yesterday announced a US dollar wallet. Is that right?
That's right.
Explain that to me, because I thought you were a Bitcoin company.
Sure. So Coinbase, our mission is kind of to make Bitcoin easy to use. And one of the new features we launched just yesterday was the ability for users now to store US dollar balances on Coinbase. So previously, people would come to Coinbase and say, look, I want to buy $100 of Bitcoin. We'd say, okay, you're going to send us via ACH, the traditional banking system, $100, but we're going to have to wait 3 to 4 days for that to arrive. So in that time, we're holding on to that Bitcoin. Once we receive their money and we clear it, we then credit them that 0.25 of the Bitcoin. Problem is that 0.25 Bitcoin may have gone down in value, maybe worth only $80 of purchasing power, or it could have gone up. So one of the ways to alleviate that pain point for our consumers is say, look, now in certain states in the US, you can store USD on Coinbase, and that way, if you want to buy Bitcoin, we're able to basically instantly debit those dollars and credit them to Bitcoin.
So, is that insured then? FDIC insured the?
So the funds are held at an existing U.S. bank. So it falls, under existing FDIC insurance rules and regulations.
And I mean, when I heard about this announcement, it almost sounded like you were taking on the retail banks looking down maybe a few years. Is there an element of that? I mean, does your company want to?
I think there's an element of truth to that in the sense that retail banking, for the most part, is pretty consumer friendly, right? They have tellers, they have ATMs, they create online environments that I can go to wellsfargo.com and easily try to move money around. And at Coinbase, we're trying to do the same thing. To us, it's how can we make Bitcoin easy to use? I look back a year ago, and Bitcoin at this time was worth 3x what it is now. But I've seen a lot of progress in that last year, as I think Adam and Bobby have as well, and just ease of acquiring Bitcoin, simplicity in moving it around, additional functionality. That's really what Coinbase is trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, that sort of getting consumers to be able to spend, we were talking about this backstage, getting consumers to be able to easily spend Bitcoin still seems like a big challenge. I mean, you can acquire it now if you really want to, which was, hard in the US before Coinbase came along, but there are great incentives for merchants to adopt it, but I'm still kind of waiting to see what it's going to take to get consumers to show up at delis and gas stations and places like that.
I think it's about finding the use case for Bitcoin. I'd say we're still, most of the consumers of Bitcoin right now are still speculating on what the value could be when we actually find the use case that will be created, hence me starting 100 Bitcoin companies to find this use case, this magical use case. And I believe that when thinking about Bitcoin, you shouldn't be thinking geographically just in the US, you should be thinking global. And the best use cases are cross-border transactions. The best analogy that I've actually heard for Bitcoin from a guy named Marwan Forsley, he runs a company called Align Commerce, is that Bitcoin is very similar to Skype. So originally the telco companies had this monopoly on how long-distance calling would work. Basically, the telco companies could charge you whatever they wanted for a long-distance call per minute, like up to $10 per minute. And then Skype came along and they said, hey, as long as you're in our network, this will be free. But if you call outside of our network, we're going to charge you a small amount of like 10 cents per minute, 5 to 10 cents per minute. Bitcoin is very similar to that in payment. If you're in the network, if you're charging inside the network, it will generally be virtually free. But if you're going to be transacting in RMB and USD and other currencies, you will have to pay a certain amount of money, and I believe that that margin will go down over time.
I found that when I travel, I mean, it seems like a great idea. You can have this sort of borderless currency, and you don't have to worry. But then you're in another country, and you have to convert to that currency. And so that's been my experience. Is you sort of you get hit, but converting to Bitcoin and then converting back to the local currency. I don't know if you guys have any tips about traveling and using Bitcoin when you travel.
Well, currently the traveling, those tellers, they charge you like 10 to 20% anyway.
It's even more, yeah.
Yeah, it's still better.
Exchangers in airports, even more. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's a pretty low bar to try and beat, right? I mean, those places suck.
I think Bitcoin's going to be successful the day consumers are using it and don't realize it's Bitcoin, right? So I walk up to a teller, a point of sale, and I say, look, I've got $100 in pesos or whatever it may be. I just want to move this from point A to point B. And instead of riding on a fragmented financial banking system where it takes days and every middleman takes a little cut in between, it travels over the Bitcoin network, which goes from point A to point B. It's a push technology. It just settles at a much more rapid pace, and there aren't a whole bunch of middlemen taking out fees. I think when that happens, and there's still a lot of infrastructure to build up to do that, that's when Bitcoin's going to start becoming really successful.
Yeah, I think sometimes people underestimate the power of Bitcoin as a store of value. There are actually places where you can negotiate, where people just want to have Bitcoin because it's
Yeah, so with Bitcoin and stored value, my take, it's a chicken and egg problem, right? So if no one holds Bitcoins on their mobile phones or on their mobile wallets, then it's hard for them to spend it, and it's hard for merchants to have a reason to accept Bitcoin, and vice versa. If no merchants take Bitcoin, there's no reason for people to hold them in their wallets. So in this audience, how many of you actually hold Bitcoins with you right now? Could you send Bitcoins? How many of you had Bitcoins here?
Actually,
so 5–10%.
Yeah,
but how many of you actually have it available in mobile form where you could send Bitcoins right now? Would you be able to? So a bunch of people do. So that's good.
As opposed to
so,
like a paper
so the point about the stored value is, my take is, this is happening in China as well. We need to get more people to believe in Bitcoin so that they're willing to have some of their assets in Bitcoin on their mobile phone or on their PC at all times. And when people have Bitcoins with them at all times, it doesn't have to be a lot of dollars. It could be $100, $200 worth of Bitcoins. Then with that, they can start mobilely. They can say, anytime I want to see something, I could buy this, then I could buy it using Bitcoins, whether it's cross-border payments or even local payments.
What about this idea of interfacing Bitcoin with sort of more traditional mechanisms like a Bitcoin debit card or something like that? Is that viable, or is that just sort of?
It's a cool concept, but it goes back to, if someone has Bitcoins in the debit card, that's Visa, MasterCard, then it defeats the purpose. You're sort of acknowledging the old system is better. Right.
Yeah.
But you also don't have to change your habit, which is sort of nice.
Yeah.
Right.
So I actually think it will be a short step. I think it is important. I think it's for at least the early adopters to be able to spend their Bitcoin in a more fluid way. The Bitcoin ATM card, which there will be one eventually. We've backed one called Atlas Card. There are a bunch of people who are working on this, and it's definitely going to happen. But I think it's great because it doesn't change your habit. And imagine traveling the world and being able to sort of fluidly just use one card that was able to swipe, and it transacts into Bitcoin.
Well, ultimately, what is Bitcoin's competitor? Is it cash, or is it debit cards or credit cards?
I don't look at it as having a competitor. I look at it very complementary to what exists, right? So if you would go back 40 years and look at credit cards, would you say, is that a competitor to cash or to checks? Not really, right? It's kind of complementary to the system. It enables new behaviors, new forms of transactions. We haven't really talked about micropayments, stuff like that, that didn't exist before. Mm-hmm. And just to bounce back on that point real quickly, I also think debit card's kind of a stopgap measure. Mm-hmm. I actually think something like Apple Pay is a tremendous boon for Bitcoin, right? Because I'm a consumer. I'm used to pulling out my credit card and swiping it, right? It's muscle memory. Now I start using Apple Pay using NFC, and now I'm using my mobile device, right?
You're training them to use a phone.
Exactly, right? Right now, Bitcoin's still pretty clunky. You're using a QR code at mobile point of sale. It's not the most intuitive or frictionless checkout experience.
I see.
But one day it will come with NFC. One day you can make NFC payments with Bitcoin.
Who's doing that?
Adam's going to invest in it.
Yeah, I'll back it. So anyone who's starting one of those,
okay,
apply to booze.
Well, I wanted to talk to Adam White. Adam White, you guys had been working a lot on the sort of regulatory side of things. I saw that when you announced the US dollar wallet, you had like a little map with all the states where you can actually use it. How has that changed? I mean, a year ago, it was, well, a year and a half ago, it was kind of like Wild West. Like nobody knew what the heck the deal was with the US and regulations. Now things have settled down a bit, but we still have New York, you know, coming up. What's
I disagree with that a little bit. You know, it's been almost 2 years now where FinCEN, part of the Treasury, came out and said, Bitcoin businesses like Coinbase, you need to register as a money service business. You're in essence a bank, right? To file at the federal level, it's pretty straightforward. The issue is every state handles their own state level regulatory environments differently. So right now, if you want to move money around the country, you have to file for 48 different state money transmitter licenses. That's a headache, that's a nightmare. There's really a handful of states that kind of set the precedent for other states, right? New York, California, the larger ones. Coinbase has kind of taken a very proactive education stance. So when I first joined Coinbase, a lot of my time was spent in DC, meeting with regulators, and actually throughout the country, just helping educate on what Bitcoin is. Not even bringing up what Coinbase does, not bringing up any type of agenda, just saying, here's what Bitcoin is and here's why not to be scared of it. Here's how it can improve the financial system. I think since then we've seen a lot of companies actually stand up government affairs and policy divisions, right? Just to say, this is a real need, right? We have DC, different regulators kind of pulling for information, and we fortunately have foundations like the Bitcoin Foundation that are trying to help fill that gap. We're also doing it on a piecemeal basis.
So to back up though, what do regulators like about Bitcoin?
I think there's actually certain consumer benefits that Bitcoin has that credit cards don't, for example, right? So there's this idea that when I pay with a credit card online, I'm giving up my identity. So I have to attach my personal identity to that transaction, and I'm trusting that the merchant's not going to lose it. Well, unfortunately, we've seen this year a lot of merchants have lost it. We've seen Target, Home Depot, Neiman Marcus, and when that happens, now my credit information's out there. That's a hassle, but what's more difficult is my personal identity's out there, so I can have identity theft. With Bitcoin, your identity is abstracted from the payment rails, right? So I can push Bitcoin to Adam or to Bob or Bobby, but I'm not having to attach my address, my name, possibly my social security and other information.
What do they not like about Bitcoin?
I think like with any new technology and one that's particularly disruptive, there's a lot of concern that in the same vein how Bitcoin can be very empowering to the unbanked or underbanked, to those in poverty, right? Because you don't need to go file a formal banking relationship and have your identity. There's concerns for illicit uses, but I kind of point to the early days of the internet, right? We kind of saw pornography come up first on the internet. People said, oh, this is concerning, but if we would have written off the internet, it's kind of a tremendously wasted opportunity. I think Bitcoin's similar.
And Bobby Lee, in China, what does...
Well, it's not just in China. I would say the answer is pretty much global. So today, regulators are obviously working for governments, and what governments have is they have a natural monopoly over the printing of money. So our monetary system today is controlled and owned and distributed by the government. So all the printing of the fiat currency, whether it's US dollars or in China, the RMB, it's all the government. It's no different than 10, 20 years ago where telcos, communication, whether it's postal communication or telecommunication, is also controlled by the government. In the US, this got deregulated much earlier, but in countries in Africa and Asia, many telcos or even airlines are still very much controlled by the government. So when Bitcoin is here now as a new form of money, as a new form of currency that's totally decentralized, it sort of challenges the money system, and that's why regulators are all over it. I mean, look at all the countries around the world. All the regulators are scrambling to look at Bitcoin, how to classify it, how to regulate it. And the reason is it is so fundamentally revolutionary to that system.
And there are a couple black marks on Bitcoin's history already, dealing with Silk Road and the Mt. Gox happenings, that I think a lot of people point at that as if the currency or the technology is bad.
Well, Silk Road 2.
Yeah, Silk Road 2, that was recent. And but when the financial crisis happens, you don't go like, damn you, US dollar.
Well, I mean, do you guys expect that for there to be more sort of bad news on the Bitcoin front? I mean, like there was a sense
Only good news.
I mean, honestly, though, like there was a sense for a while that there were some skeletons in Bitcoin. There were people that started doing business in very, in the very early days and didn't have the best business practices. I mean, Mt. Gox is like the categorical example of that. And then, if you talk to people, people would say, well, they didn't really know what they were doing, and now they're out of business. Everything's going to be okay.
I think you're right that when you brought up the idea of originally it was a little bit wild westy, and it was because I've been dividing it into like there's this first generation Bitcoin entrepreneur to a second generation Bitcoin entrepreneur, and there was this like ideological bring down the government. There's there are these like feelings around it that originally sort of were created by that group. But over time, the technology has sort of taken hold, and there are all these really, really talented entrepreneurs who are starting to create real value and actually solve huge problems for the world. Right. And I feel that timeline is happening, and that like there's a shift moving from old to new. And I actually, these are two of the best companies in that industry of that new shift to the new generation. Personally, I think.
I think Adam's spot on. I think we've seen the professionalization of the industry over the last 18 months, right?
Is it professionalized at this point?
I think it's getting.
Look at these guys.
Yeah, we're wearing the
You guys wearing suits. I used to fit on the panel with a bunch of Bitcoin people. I don't fit anymore. I have just a jacket.
I mean, we've seen what, $300 million come in almost in this year alone, right? It kind of rivals the 93, 94 days of the internet. When you have backers like Andreessen Horowitz and Benchmark Capital and kind of incubators like Boost VC, they do their due diligence, right? They make sure that the actors and the management and the employees are operating with the right principles in place.
Yeah. Adam, you were talking about sort of the appeal of Bitcoin to the geeks, the fact that you can do all these, you could extend the protocol and do all these smart contracts and things like that. With Bitcoin. I mean, there's a lot going on in that world right now, but it's not clear what is really substantive. I mean, what do you think is, just...
So I think right now in the middle of Bitcoin, we're in this like super boring time in Bitcoin. Like, it was really, really exciting when the price was being speculated up to $1,200 per Bitcoin. We've had this toy for about 4 to 5 years, which is really, really fun. But no, like we also know where it breaks, where now we've had this toy for 5 years that is broken, and there's scaling problems, security problems, there are a lot of different problems, and that's why I'm so excited about the sector, is that each of those problems are a huge opportunity for an entrepreneur, whether it be security, scaling, and so I think a lot of these businesses are legitimate that are tackling this space, whether it be companies that are supporting the Bitcoin company. So I think the next generation, so right now I call it repair mode because we're in the middle of this sort of repair mode time frame of Bitcoin where there's tons of really, really, really smart people. What we did with Bitcoin was we convinced all the best engineers in the world that fintech is sexy. Like, all of them. And they're all suddenly upgrading old financial infrastructure, which is like necessary for the world, which is very, very exciting. So don't tell any engineers. That's true. And so we're in this repair mode, and I believe that all this value of all these great engineers is going into this space, and that value doesn't immediately transcend to the Bitcoin price, to adoption, but that brain power is going somewhere, and I think there's a delayed hit, and eventually it will hit the market. And I think in the next 2 years we're going to see like crazy uses for Bitcoin, crazy uses for the blockchain.
Come on, talk about some of those, though. I mean, what's actually going to work and what's not?
I mean,
it's the future of Bitcoin.
Yeah, where Bitcoin works better than US dollars or better than RMB is where the true value is, and that's for cross-border transactions. But by enabling cheaper remittances, cheaper cross-border transactions, we might create like a whole new industry of like, it brings the world closer together, because right now if I send $1 million cross borders, like I'm not saving that much money by using Bitcoin. But if I'm sending $100 cross border, I'm saving like a huge percentage of that $100. And suddenly there'll be these microtransactions that are going to start happening over across the world that I don't even know what the repercussions of that will be. And so those things are really, really exciting to me. I think media, you guys might actually figure out how to get paid. That's going to be an exciting time.
Yeah. I want to add to the cross-border. I like your analogy about Skype. If you think about Skype, Skype's been around for 15 years. I think so, right? 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And
10,
the
12.
earliest adopters were indeed the people who were trying to talk long distance, because that was the best use case. Long distance communication, long distance phone call. You need to bypass the expensive long distance phone calls. Skype was used. But today, people are making so-called domestic or short distance calls using Skype, FaceTime, or iMessage. And because Skype infrastructure has been built up, this sort of voice over IP has been built up for that. So Bitcoin today, the early days, I think the highest value would be to do long distance, what we call cross-border remittance money transfers. And that's where you can save the most money. But over time, people will get used to just sending money over Bitcoin, even if we're sitting in the same room.
But what about all these really sort of out there ideas like using a Bitcoin-like protocol to allocate compute resources or to do real estate titles or to trade stocks? I mean,
absolutely.
Does that you guys believe that will all happen?
It's already happening. There are already companies going out fundraising, so-called, using Bitcoin, using cryptocurrencies and altcoins. So this is in the brand new territory. I mean,
okay, fundraising is one thing, but actually delivering.
So we have a company called Hedgy that actually is logging contracts, hedging contracts in the blockchain, which is very exciting. And they're just using the Bitcoin blockchain, which that's a super using the blockchain as an escrow service, which is like a new unique thing because before someone had to actually hold all the money. We have a company that's doing a very similar thing with loans. I believe that anything that is entailing contracts will be able to add things to the blockchain, which is a very exciting. Yes, those things are happening and they're going to happen. Anything that is proof of work, proof of like ownership, proof of that type of industry will be using a blockchain or the Bitcoin blockchain, I believe.
I think we have to throw in Internet of Things as well. I mean, that's kind of one of the hot topics lately. But there's a saying that I love that, quote unquote, on the blockchain, no one knows you're a refrigerator, right? So you can now link up your refrigerator that it says, this is the spot where the milk is. When it weighs less than this amount, automatically buy milk from Amazon and have it delivered to me. Maybe by drone at that point, who knows, right? But there's this way that you don't actually have any humans in the loop. You have smart technology that actually does your buying and selling, and you can either be a net contributor or a net kind of recipient from this network.
Oh, that's fun.
So Adam White, does the openness of the blockchain give your company some kind of competitive advantage then when you're going up against sort of traditional financial companies?
I wouldn't say, I think the openness of the blockchain is what makes it tremendously powerful. What truly makes it revolutionary, right, is you have this entirely open, distributed, worldwide ledger that anyone can access, anyone can write to, anyone can review. And what Bitcoin does, capital B Bitcoin, the actual protocol, it allows for the proof and transfer of ownership anywhere, relatively immediately, right? So when we go up to existing corporations, financial institutions, whatever they are, there's this idea that how can it be open and still be secure, right? And we point a lot to email. It's kind of an open protocol. That's a language that people either decide to opt in and use or they decide not to. But if you opt in, you have to play by those rules. And there's no way to, quote unquote, break those rules.
Okay, so we talked about the trough of enthusiasm that Bitcoin is experiencing right now, and a lot of that has to do with the price of Bitcoin. When it was over $1,000, people like me were writing lots of stories about it, and everybody was very excited. And then it drops, around 300, and that tapers off a little bit. I mean, what has been the effect of that, though, of sort of the removal of that.
So low price is actually a very good thing. So obviously high price, everybody's excited. Everybody's like frenzy about buying Bitcoins. But today we're at a low price. And I would say, for those of you who are thinking seriously, if you believe in Bitcoin, you think it's going to be here forever like the internet, this is a great time to get in. Right? The next set of Bitcoin millionaires will be made from people buying Bitcoin at these low prices.
Okay, but
So if you think this is the low price.
so are you seeing? I mean, what about wallet? New wallets. Is
So
that,
let me point to it from a kind of transactional standpoint. So at Coinbase, we have this unique ability to look in and say, what's our consumer adoption? What's our merchant adoption? What's commerce transaction look like? And the short answer is consumer growth has continued to grow upward exponentially, not as quickly as it does when we see the kind of boom in Bitcoin price and media covers it and we get a flock of new users, but it's still growing exponentially for us as well as companies like Blockchain, Circle, and so on. Same for the merchant side, businesses that are now accepting Bitcoin. What I think is fascinating is we look internally and say, how does our monthly average merchant spend, right, consumer spending Bitcoin to merchants, vary with the Bitcoin price? In average, it's very much decoupled. So as the Bitcoin price increases or decreases, that consumer spend to merchants with Bitcoin continues to grow over time.
okay. So I'm going to read. I have this one written out here because there's some numbers that I want to get right here. In August, Patrick Byrne said that Overstock.com was doing about $15,000 in Bitcoin transactions per day. Not bad, but the Silk Road 2.0 was apparently doing $260,000 per day in its first month of operation. So, Bitcoin really became, came to everybody's attention as sort of this currency for illegal transactions. I know, Adam Draper, you feel that the international remittances is going to be the next sort of the thing to replace that. But do either of you have a sense of what's going to be the next sort of the legitimate Silk Road for Bitcoin, as it were?
I don't want to compare anything to the next Silk Road, right? But I'll give you the safe answer. The safe answer is I don't think I'm going to know. I don't think Adam or Bobby's going to know. But I think services that allow a Bitcoin API, so to speak, right? An easy way for entrepreneurs, really smart people around the world to build new applications and products. They're the ones that are going to figure it out. Taking a step back from that, I'll go out on a limb, and I'm really excited about microtransactions. Here's a way now to do something to enable a behavior online that didn't exist before. So there's a reason why you can't spend less than $1 online. It's because credit cards have high fixed fees, right? And if you do want to spend 99 cents on an iTunes song, Apple takes some risk and they kind of bundle them together. With Bitcoin, I can send 3 cents, 5 cents, 25 cents to anyone because there's no flat fixed fee. So what we're seeing now are companies like ChangeTip. Coinbase recently launched something very similar for a way to consumers to tip each other, right? To send Adam 20 cents via Twitter or to send 30 cents to an artist on SoundCloud that I really like. I think this is a tremendously positive step for Bitcoin.
So I agree with you. I think micropayments is a great example of a new use case for Bitcoin. But the other fundamental thing is not to forget Bitcoin as a store of value. Because one thing we always don't forget is that because Bitcoin is designed to be limited to 21 million units, it really is just 21 million. So now there's about over 13 million out there in circulation. But even for the next 100 years, it'll only reach 21 million. So at our rate of inflation, if you look at how much money is being printed, regardless of whether you look at the QE2 program, the fact is we live in a world of inflation where the money system is designed to keep printing more money, where money is devalued over time. I remember, when $20 US dollars could get me a lot, could get me through a weekend or get me through movies and a meal and a date. But today, $20 is you just spend it like water. Everybody's spending $50, $100 bills.
Right.
So if you look at that, you extrapolate what's going to happen in 5 years, 10 years. We're all going to have $500,000 salaries, right, in 10 years. And at that point, what's the point of saving money? You might as well save it in harder assets like Bitcoin or digital assets.
When you're thinking about what the next big use case for Bitcoin is, it should be about what it does better than cash. And the things that it does better than cash are cross-border transactions in a smaller amount, microtransactions, store of value, it's middle of the road, but I do agree that that's in a lot of countries. We're really spoiled in the US, we trust our banking system generally. But the countries like Argentina, where inflation's 25% a year, or countries where bank account adoption's 10%, but cell phone adoption's 90%. Like Bitcoin is a leapfrogging technology for those places. It's a place where all of a sudden financial technology gets brought up to the same playing field that U.S. has been playing on for quite some time. So yeah, that's what I would say.
So we talked about Bitcoin exclusively on this panel, but there are all these other alternative currencies. There's Litecoin, Feathercoin, Corkcoin, Dogecoin. I could go on for a few hundred currencies.
I haven't heard of that.
I don't know. There's a Corkcoin, I'm telling you. But my question is there a point to any of these? Is there a need for any of these alternative currencies, or can it all be done with Bitcoin?
Yeah. Go Litecoin. My brother tells me that's worse.
Okay, that's a conflict of interest because his brother created Litecoin. But okay,
No,
maybe.
yeah. So I think it's good. I think altcoins are there because there's more innovation. Bitcoin was designed, with certain principles, and all the altcoins are trying different things. Not all the new things will work out, but certainly having more innovation in the altcoins is good. And the best thing about this whole ecosystem is that Bitcoin is open source. So down the road, if some altcoins develop some better algorithms or better ideas or better, concepts, Bitcoin can borrow from that and can improve from that and change itself.
So my 100 Bitcoin companies over the next 3 years are Bitcoin companies, not alternative currency companies or digital currency companies. And the reason is that I think Bitcoin itself is hard enough for the average consumer to wrap their head around that pitching them that there are 300 other altcoins just confuses people. I do believe that there have been certain altcoins that have added a lot of value to the ecosystem, whether it be like easier onboarding, like Dogecoin was a great marketing gimmick to get people into using digital currencies, which was a fantastic thing. There are a lot of tips happening with Dogecoin. And Litecoin is another one that's in that bucket. But generally, I think for long-term use, for long-term like real technology revolution, that sort of thing, I am backing Bitcoin solely. So
here's the problem with altcoins is what gives Bitcoin its value is the robustness of the network, right? One of the metrics we throw out is that the computing power of the Bitcoin network is greater than the world's top 500 supercomputers added together 10x over. It's incredibly powerful, right? The issue with every altcoin is you have to create a new blockchain and you have to have your own miners for that network, right? So a lot of people have said, like, look, Bitcoin's fantastic, but we can create something better. Well, the problem is Bitcoin's got this huge computing power, this huge network. So there's kind of been a recent development, this gets kind of technical, something called sidechains, which says, let's build altcoin-like coins, but let's build it on the Bitcoin blockchain. So we continue to add to the robustness, the computing power of this network that makes it safe and secure, but we can still experiment and try new things. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm a big believer because Bitcoin is definitely the thing to bet on. Definitely it's got the first mover advantage.
We're all biased,
the network effect. And so what I said earlier about altcoin, what I meant is it's good to have the robust sort of innovation stuff, but really we're really strongly behind Bitcoin because that's the thing. You don't want to back 300 currencies. The world will never adopt 300 altcoins. But what we need is for Bitcoin to succeed, and then we're changing the world that way.
Well, Adam Draper, you were talking about mining companies, and one of the side effects of this focus on Bitcoin is like the amount of compute power involved in sort of computing the blockchain seems excessive to me. It almost seems obscene, really. Is that just something that we just have to deal with?
No, well, I think it's growing pains. First, we have to hit the maximum. A lot of people talk about the transaction speed or like not being able to handle 7 transactions per second or something, or more than 7. I think that's what the number is. But I think that we aren't even close to that yet. So when we get there, there will be basically what the blockchain is a huge data set, and what. It's sort of like video files or other things that have been streamed over the internet. Eventually, there will be a company that is able to compress that data set. I believe that this is an opportunity for startups to actually capitalize and help the entire ecosystem. So,
I see the band is getting ready, so I'm going to just have one last question for you all. Satoshi, are we ever going to find out who Satoshi is, yes or no?
I've learned never to bet on the price of Bitcoin and never try to guess who Satoshi is. So I'm going to say no, I don't think we will.
No.
So I'm optimistic. I think one day Satoshi will come out. And
yes.
Yeah, I really want to know who he is, or who he or she.
or group or people. I do not think so. I think the Bitcoin system benefits from the anonymity of Satoshi. So I do not believe that we will.
And I'm going to vote on this one too. I think we will, but it may be after Satoshi's death, and I'll be the one to report it.
Oh, good.
Great.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you all for your insights into Bitcoin. It's very interesting.
Thank you. Thank you.